he always had two ways in. He had one way in, one way out. All kinds of really nasty things happen to him. Somebody somewhere does not want to happen. My name's Phil Fetterman. Basically, I've been around the cryptid stuff most of my life. When I was a little kid, my grandmother had an experience on the property where I grew up. She had an Airstream trailer that she bought and had it on a cement slab. And she said that one day she's out there in the Airstream, one of these creatures came up and hit the back of the Airstream, pushing it completely off the slab. Which, the evidence that was on the Airstream, if you're familiar with them, they have a round back on them, and they had two distinct handprints where he caved in the metal on the back of the Airstream when he pushed the thing, and there's one on each side. So she said about to warn us kids about the woodboogers, which we had no idea what a woodbooger was. So she said, well, apparently they're here, so you have to watch out. And she warned us basically not to be out after dark because that's when the woodboogers come out. And basically with that, I had no clue what that even was. I had no idea what a Bigfoot was or anything else. And now that I'm older, thinking back about as much as I went around in the woods and everything else there was signs of them everywhere. I mean, there was tree structures literally right out past my backyard, right in the woods there. There was all kinds of tree bends and breaks everywhere. And we didn't have any large animals that would, break stuff off like that, especially when it's like, 4 or 5 feet up. So we'd never had severe weather that would even do it, especially not on a young sapling. So knowing now what I didn't know then, I know what apparently there was all kinds of signs over there. Nobody knew about it, except for my grandmother whenever she warned us about them. So after that, I kind of got older and I started seeing these shows about Bigfoot and all that. And I was like, well, what if this thing's for real? So I started doing some research when the internet came available. And I started finding out there's reports of these things all over the place. And I'm like, okay, well, there's reports in the West Coast. There's reports here on the East Coast. There's reports in the Deep South. There's reports everywhere.
Hi, I'm Linda Eastburn of Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, and I have a new book out called Threshold to Encounters. It's about 40 years of research and experience with all of these wild cryptids that many of you I know have encountered yourself. You can find it on Amazon.com.
And I'm like, so, well, chances are these things were around, and so I started doing more and more research on them. And then once I moved here to Pennsylvania, then I was interested with it. And I started, talking to some people that were here that had a research group. And they were like, yeah, they're all over the place here. And I mean, I was going out hunting and fishing and everything here in Pennsylvania. And I was noticing the tree breaks. And I was noticing the wood structures. And one day when I was actually hunting with my dad, we came across a area that had a real thick things of thorns, and it looked like it had an entrance going in on one side and like an exit on the other side. So going in there to see if I could, what was in there, crawled in the entranceway, and inside that middle of that thorn thicket was a 10-foot round cleared out spot that had a bed made in like a big nest. It had like pine limbs and all that, and you just a push on it and all that. It was like squishy. So something had been living in that pine thicket or that thorn thicket. So like, that's interesting, but I never really placed it with Bigfoot at that time. And basically around the area here, I've heard reports of them. I was like, okay, I kept looking for them, never really saw one. And then one day, see, I'm actually a retired EMT, and my partner and I, we were driving the ambulance down Route 219 here, heading towards Somerset, town down there. And I happened to glance over, and walking along 219, right along one of the fence lines there by a field, there was one of these things walking along the fence line. So I brought it to his attention, hey, that's a Bigfoot. He's like, you're kidding. So we did a U-turn in the median in the emergency lane and went back and came back around again to see if we could see it again. But at that time, I brought up my camera phone up because I wanted to get a picture of it. And just in that short time it was just doing that U-turn to come back around, that thing disappeared. And I don't know if it took off after I saw it or what, but it was very interesting that it disappeared that fast because it was a nice big wide open thing and it was walking, I wouldn't say necessarily any faster than what a human would, but with all the hanging hair and the conical head and all that, I mean, it was blatantly clear what this thing was. And it was definitely, I'd say, just over the fence posts over there along 219. I would say it was about 4 feet taller than those fence posts. And it was very interesting.
I can imagine. Yeah. So is that the only one you've actually physically seen?
Yeah, that's the only one I've seen so far. I mean, I've seen lots of evidence of them around the area. I've had reports recently of some being seen in a little area called Quemahoming, which is here in Somerset County. And there's been some sightings by the Quemahoming Dam of a couple of these things. And basically, some people taking casts, footprint casts and all that of them. So, I mean, given that area, it's very likely something could be living there because it's really thick and not a lot of people, right around that area. So, I mean, there's, I guess a town around it kind of, but in the wooded areas there, that's pretty thick. Nobody really goes in there too much.
Going back to your grandmother, I find that really interesting. Now, about how old were you when she told you not to go out into the woods at night or about outside at night so much?
I was the oldest, so I was about I say about 8 or 9 years old, and my younger brother, and he was 5 years younger than me, so he was only about 3, so he literally wasn't going to be out at night. But I was kind of a free spirit, and I'd run all over the property. She had a 24-acre pecan orchard, and I was basically all over that and in the woods and pretty much everywhere. I mean, I was a typical Gen X kid. If I could get there with my bicycle, I was there. I'd go fishing and all that stuff. Pretty much on my own. Because we had a 40-acre lake there beside where we lived.
Did your grandmother ever describe seeing one of these, or was it just the evidence on the trailer?
She seemed to have a lot of knowledge of them because she knew, right. She told us about them being wood boogers. So I guess, I mean, her family, she was, raised in like the 1800s, early 1900s. And her family, from what I'm gathering, maybe had more knowledge of them than what we did. Because, basically she grew up very rural and we were more like, middle of town kind of deal until we moved on to the property where my grandmother had her property there. But we were right up against a huge swamp, and these things obviously lived in the swamp. But that was very interesting. I mean, thinking back on it, we had dogs that would, bark at anything, be not really vicious, but if a skunk or raccoon or something like that came in the yard, we knew about it because they'd go after them. And there's been a couple times that I went out to feed the dog after dark, and it was cowering in its doghouse, wouldn't come out, didn't want to interact at all. Um, Basically, it just didn't act like itself at all. And I really didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought maybe it just, wasn't feeling good or something like that, being kid logic. But I'm thinking maybe that dog caught a whiff of something that it didn't like. And, basically, they had a couple times when my kid's sister was born, um, that we kept hearing things around the windows at night. And, there was like a couple times I could have sworn I found like a really large wet footprint on our back deck. We had like a cement slab there, and you would see like footprints here and there on there, but I never really thought too much. I just, thought something, just the way the water spilled or do whatever. But my dad and them, they never really paid much attention to anything to do with them. My grandfather, he didn't really bother with them either, just my grandmother. So she was the only one that really was concerned about it, because whenever that thing pushed that trailer, she was in it. And she wasn't very happy about that, because this scared her half to death.
Did you happen to see the damage done on that Airstream trailer?
Oh yeah, she had that trailer for years.
What did it look like when you saw it?
Well, in the back of the Airstream, you have like a window, like a rectangular window, and above it you have like the three little lights above the window, and then you had the two like brake lights down below. And this thing on both sides of where the three lights are at the top had dents caved in on the top of that trailer, and it pushed it. I would say maybe 5-6 feet to push it off of that slab. And I mean, it did a number on that trailer as far as the tongue that anchors the car. And it bent that all up whenever it pushed it, because it dug it into the ground, because it has force whenever that thing pushed off that slab. And my grandmother, from that point on, anytime she had to go out at night, she carried a gun with her. And she always had this pistol with her she carried. And she kept saying about the Woodboogers. And being a kid, I had no idea what a Woodbooger even was. But
Did anyone else in that area talk about them or know of the Woodboogers?
Not really, because back then it was kind of a thing of, if you saw something that was odd, you really didn't talk about it because you didn't want anybody to think you're nuts. And it wasn't really a lot said, but there was a lot of strange things reported, like livestock going missing, and various things around the area. They of course they chalked it up to everything under the sun except for a Bigfoot. But here's the thing: that chicken coops would be opened up and birds would be taken out, and then the coop would be closed back up. So they thought maybe somebody thought maybe a fox found a way in or something, but yet they couldn't figure out how anything was getting in there. They had some small cows that were like yearlings or whatever that were taken, some calves, and just various odd things. And there was really, I mean, the black bears were kind of rare where I grew up. I mean, they were there, I guess, but I don't recall ever hearing anybody even shooting one or seeing one. So there really wasn't anything big other than maybe like a bobcat. And I mean, when I got older, somebody spotted they call it black panther down there. It's basically like a cougar up here, but there's a couple of them were taken. People went out and shot them and brought them in, but that was just an oddity for those cats to be around. But yeah, there was, the biggest thing down there was alligators, because they seem to be like every body of water that you know have down there had an alligator in it.
After seeing that one on the side of the road,
Yeah,
and able to actually get a visual sighting of it, what did you think it was? Did you
I knew
recognize it
right away.
immediately as a Bigfoot, and did you think it was a flesh and blood creature?
I wanted to get the double check because when I saw it, it was like mid stride, and there was enough of these silhouette things around that basically people have these silhouettes in their yard of the Bigfoot and all. So I wanted to make sure that somebody wasn't being a practical joke or putting one of these things up. And I told my partner about it, and it was, like I said, we spun back around like immediately to come back and take a better look at it. And that thing crossed that field in that short a time because it was there to where I don't think it went back the way it came, but it sure disappeared pretty fast. And yeah, it definitely was not like a silhouette cutout. And this thing definitely had like the conical head and the long hair, and it was like a reddish brown hair. So I mean, it was like definitely moving whenever I saw it. So it definitely wasn't cut out. So I don't know. It was very interesting.
When you were a kid and you saw like the structures and such on your grandmother's place, what describe some of those? What did they look like?
Basically, you had well, down there you have these really tall pine trees, and most times we'd see like the tree knots where the root bundles. They'd be a couple trees bent over, and you'd always find this one with the roots up in the air, and then you'd have stuff woven. I mean, there was like some vines and things down there, like kudzu and all that, and you'd find like woven material like in these trees that didn't really fit. The kudzu would grow over stuff, but it wouldn't really like intertwine and you know anything like that. It would just take basically just completely cover stuff. Um, yeah, basically they had a bunch of those. We had the trees bent over, like like several feet up that were I wouldn't say really a clean break, but you can tell they're like bent to a point of snapping. And some of those trees are about 3 inches round, so they didn't snap that easy. And especially with these pine trees, they bend. They don't really snap. So it was kind of an oddity there, but we did get some severe thunderstorms and stuff, so nobody really thought anything of it. And not too many people went where I went as far as back there, because I'd go exploring like old roads and things like that people that uh, had grown up and all that. That you can still see like the old tracks and I take my bicycle back there and go looking around at all this stuff. Some old structures in the woods from old housing places back there. You had to watch back there because you couldn't really go into the old buildings because you had water moccasins everywhere. So basically, just a bunch of old rundown sheds pretty much in old built houses and barns and stuff like that back in that swamp area. But yeah, not a lot of people even went there. I mean, you know, just kind of an odd feeling there. You go into that area and it's always dark, and you'd always feel kind of creeped out like someone was watching you. But I look around, I didn't see anything watching me, so I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just it's my imagination. So I went ahead and did whatever I was going to do. Looked around or whatever, and then I left for the day, and nothing really bothered me. Nothing really you know scared me or anything like. Yeah, I just had this creepy feeling, and I had that creepy
Did you
feeling.
ever hear any of the vocals out there?
There was a lot of weird noises coming out of the swamp at night. Um, some of which my grandfather said were alligator noises, but thinking back on it, I'm not so sure because that was just odd. Then we had weird bird calls and things coming out of the swamp at night. And most birds, down there don't make calls at night. So I mean, we'd have various things, and there's a couple of times that um, I shined the spotlight out and flashlight stuff because the dog was acting weird or whatever. I hear him whimpering, and I shined the backyard, and there's a couple of times I thought I saw eyes on the back fence, but not. I couldn't really tell anything from the distance. Just that I thought I saw something. I wasn't really positive. And it'd be like you scan a light across, and then like something was there, so you bring the light back, and then it isn't there anymore, kind of deals. And yeah, that's all. Basically, that's pretty much what I had there. But I didn't know what I saw or if I even saw anything. Um, like I said, I wasn't looking for a Bigfoot back, and I had no clue what a Bigfoot even was. So
How about the
yeah.
smells? Oftentimes there's a very, very strong, pungent kind of offensive odor around Bigfoot. Were you ever able, did you ever pick up on any of those odors?
Oh, we had a couple times we get swamp gas coming out. What I attributed to swamp gas, where the whole backyard kind of stank a bit. But there was always seemed like it goes away, by the next morning, and nobody really thought anything of it. I mean, it wasn't like any of our. We had a couple of birds go missing, but um, nothing drastic ever happened around our house, other than that thing with my grandmother, and that kind of was interesting enough because she told my grandfather about it. He's like shook his head and just like, oh lady, you're nuts.
What do
He
you think
didn't
their
take it seriously.
motivation was for doing that to the Airstream? Any idea?
It was new. Basically she had just gotten it, and she had that cement slab out there that was on the property, and she decided to put the Airstream on it. And she would do like her crafts, and she used to make dolls. So she put all of her doll making material and stuff out there in this Airstream, and she'd go out there and tinker around making dolls. And we had electricity out there, so she'd run her little sewing machines and all of her stuff and make these dolls. And she had dolls like everywhere in there. She had like Native American dolls, all different kinds. I mean, she'd get little swatches of fabric from wherever, and she'd make like her own dresses for them and all kinds of stuff. I mean, she had quite the collection when she passed away, and a lot of them were pretty valuable. So,
Was this some distance from the house that she lived in? Was it
yeah,
like in the
basically,
Bigfoot territory somehow?
well, yeah, she had the main house. Her main house was separated from the pecan orchard. We had a fence up around it, and the the uh, Airstream was actually in the pecan orchard, and she put it out there. I mean, I'm not sure why she had it out there, but she had her house, what she called a doll house. It was like a little one room, mini house. Um, never had no plumbing, no electricity, nothing in it. She had the ham radio shack where my grandfather kept all his ham radio equipment. And then she had the big barn with the tractor in it, and a little barn that she had her lawnmowers in. And then she had the pecan orchard further out. And she used to harvest pecans every year to pay for her taxes and stuff. So she had quite a bit of equipment for taking care of that 24-acre pecan orchard.
And this backed up to the swamp area?
Yeah,
About how much land
yeah.
was in that swamp area, do you think?
Ooh, I think it went for miles. Trying to think. I know I measured it one day, and as far as looking on Google Maps and all that, and I think it was like 10, 15 miles of swamp, and it's just like it's just nasty back in there. It's like it had water and marsh, quicksand, and everything else back in there. It's like nobody ever went back in.
Did it drain off into like a river someplace or?
Yeah, it was just a drain off from the 40-acre lake, went down in there, that swamp area.
Was that a
And that
public lake or was that a private lake?
was private lake. The fellow that owned it, he owned that part of that swamp back there. And he built a spillway and all that. It used to be just like a weird, I don't know. He built up the spillway and made it, sealed off the lake, made it deeper. But basically, he maintained the lake, let his kids fish there, and he had some pretty good sized fish there. But the main swamp itself, nobody went back in there. I mean, they had the houses back in there a little bit. You could see them from like the main uh, the main lake. See like the houses and the little structures, stuff from there. It wasn't that far back in, but that's what caught my attention. I was out fishing one day and I spotted the structures back in there, the houses. So I went to go see what they were, but I never would go deep into the swamp because I was always, worried about alligators and snakes and everything else that lived back in there. So, I don't think my brother never went back there at all. He said that place creeped him out.
A lot of people who have a Bigfoot activity on their property or have been out researching Bigfoot activity, they see some strange lights and orbs and things like that. Did you ever encounter that in those woods?
Not really orbs. I mean, we did have some swamp gas we saw one time. Me and my dad were out fishing. I guess that could have been an orb. It just seemed like it kind of a weird glow. It wasn't really like a ball moving like you see pictured. It was just back in, deeper in the woods, you see like this glow, almost like if somebody had a light back there, is lighting up an area. But you never saw like the beam itself. Never just the place is lit up some. And nothing really other than that. It never didn't move, just that one area just seemed to glow for some reason, from time to time, which we thought maybe was swamp gas. And we never really thought too much about it. My dad, he went to see, they had this guy show up in our town that had a what he called a Bigfoot in his freezer. And he had that big thing up there, and you had to pay $1 to go see this thing. And my dad went up there and looked at it. The guy claimed up and down as a real Bigfoot in a freezer. And my dad looked at it and he says, "That's a bear." He said, that's not even a Bigfoot. That's just something dressed up in a bear skin. So he was kind of offset about that. But he never really, researched them or even bothered with them. And he swore up and down his sister had one that went through her backyard when she was living up here in PA somewhere. He said he heard the dog freaking out, and she looked out the window and saw it walk right past the doghouse. But that's all he would ever say about that one. His sister, I never really talked to her.
Now, this was an area close to where your grandmother experienced the Bigfoot with the trailer?
No, this is, my grandmother was down there in Alabama. That's where I'm originally from. And then up here in PA is where the other stuff's happened, as far as a sighting here recently, specifically Mahoming. So, I mean, I've been kind of all over the place. I've been Alabama, Louisiana. Now I'm up here.
I see. So that was farther south where your grandmother's experience was. That would explain more of the swamp area, of course.
Yeah, that was in a little town called Grand Bay. It was right on the Mississippi-Alabama state line.
I see. So have you ever seen any craft in the air or anything like that around these areas?
We've had some strange things as far as that we saw from time to time. Nothing steady. Um, we thought they were shooting stars or stuff like that, but we never really, put, most of us kids were in the house, but as soon as it got dark, so we never really saw a lot, and we really didn't look during the daytime for UFOs. Then whenever the thing with In Search Of came out with Leonard Nimoy on TV, then of course everybody's looking for UFOs then. And we saw a couple things we thought maybe were UFOs, pretty high up, but nothing down low like you see pictured on TV today, where you see like this triangled craft and these obvious orbs that are moving all around us in the air. Nothing like that. We just like, see some odd things moving around pretty high up. But yeah, there's no real UFO sightings with any of our stuff down there. Um, Pretty much the same here. I haven't really noticed any UFO activity here, but of course I hear from other people there has been, so I don't know.
What do you think? What do you think Bigfoot is?
Actually, it's kind of a toss up to me. Going by what I'm hearing from the Native Americans and stuff like that, I believe they're kind of their own people. They're not human, but they're not a monkey either. They have their own language. They have, the natives actually traded with them. They just said you can't trust them. So I don't know. It just not real sure exactly what they are. Um, but I know that there's been reports all over the place of these things actually helping people. I mean, some guy who's a lumber guy I've heard of that he had a tree come down on him. He was trapped, and one of these things actually came out and helped pull the tree off. So, I mean, this has been kind of a toss up. And then I hear these things about, dogmen now, which I really haven't researched them too much. But those things sound vicious. So I really don't want to encounter one. So,
No, I've heard some of those stories. Yeah, they can be very, very vicious. It sounds like to me.
yeah,
Anyway,
they stalk people, from what I understand. One of the
the
stories I heard about them is that the person was on the second floor of their house, and one of these things managed to crawl up on the second floor of the house and was looking in their window at
I've
them,
heard of
and it was
cases
following.
where they've looked in windows and even managed to get inside a house on occasion, but
Yeah,
they're strange beings, that's for sure. Do you actually do you do any actual research today? Do you go out and actually physically look for Bigfoot today?
lately I haven't been able to, so I became disabled. Um, but I used to actually go out and do investigations. Um, did a few around, Central City area, and there was definitely sign out there of some of these things. There was tree structures. There was um, all kinds of stuff. It was like nesting you could find just weird places where it would literally like I said, broken off limbs and be like a bed made. And they're always seem like they're in a sheltered area or a protected area. Like I said, with the one out there with the thorn thicket, um, they seem like they always had two ways in. They had one way in, one way out. So I guess if something came in one way, they'd go out the other way. I found a couple of things with the bedding. I found where mountain laurels had been, pulled in and used for bedding. Pine seems to be their favorite thing. Pine limbs and stuff like that. Um, it basically is always near like a water source. Um, Usually with fish or whatever available in there. From what I've seen that, the wood structures they're pretty much just anywhere. Um, I hear that there's actually somebody found some here in the woods back in behind my house here. Not too long ago, they found some wood structures, which as soon as I get a chance, I'll get up there and take a look at those. So there may be one in my area now. But I think these things, some of them are migratory. Some of them actually seem like they are permanent residents. They, stay in one area a year long. But I think the majority of them are migratory because they were in an area for a while, and then they move on, and there's no sightings for like years. Then all of a sudden they come back, and then sightings begin again. The ones around where I'm at now, I think these are migratory because I've been, hunted the woods around here, and I haven't seen sign of anything or anything. And now I'm hearing there's actually stuff around. So, I think maybe that something's either moved into the area or is passing through.
They do seem to migrate sometimes. They have a territory maybe, but then they migrate from one food source to another food source. And it does seem like waterways have a lot to do with that.
Yeah. Now there was one sighted, I'm trying to think how many years ago, like 10, 15 years ago. There's a little creek between Windber, Pennsylvania and Central City, Pennsylvania. And it's called Sweeney Creek. And somebody actually saw one, I think they got a picture of it, crossing the creek. And they call it like Mid Creek. But not positive on that one because there's no real, evidence. I haven't seen a photo or anything. The person claims there is one. So I'm not sure on that one.
When you were doing your research, what were some of the cases that you studied that you felt like had the most validity and the most evidence?
The one out in Central City had a friend of mine call me. He told me he thinks he had a Bigfoot, and I'm like, okay, I'd come out and basically staked out his place, and we sit in my car and just watch because he just wanted to see if it's somebody prowling around his house or it was actually a Bigfoot. But that his, I think, is actually a Bigfoot because he actually had a really large handprint. It's like really, these things seem like it had the skin has a lot of oil to it, and he had this oily handprint that was twice the size of my hand on a second story or a second window, second floor window. And he said this thing was looking in his window at him. And this thing, I mean, it was a huge handprint. And you can just going inside the house and looking out, you can see, the 5 fingers and just the huge size of his hand. And it's like it had like dirt and stuff caught in onto it. So you could definitely make it, see it pretty easily.
How tall would the Bigfoot had to have been to have reached up that high on a window?
I think maybe that one is one of the ones that maybe climbed up on a roof because he had a lower roof. I think it actually climbed up on it. But his deal was he has like a retaining wall behind his house, and even a human could actually pretty much get from that retaining wall onto that roof pretty easy. So I think this thing literally just stepped up onto the roof and was up there looking in the windows. But there's been reports of these things looking at windows, watching people play games, watching movies, from picture windows and stuff like that. So, and then it's the whole thing.
Did your grandmother feel like that they were watching her in that Airstream before they knocked it over?
No, she didn't really give an indication that she was worried about anything. This lady, a little old lady. I mean, she was, maybe about 5 foot nothing, but basically a firecracker. I mean, she wouldn't back down from anything. And Yeah, this thing it spooked her. So that's was saying a lot for us kids. If something was around that spooked my grandmother. I mean, she would sit there and you know she didn't even flee a hurricane. I mean, she wasn't scared of nothing like that. But that thing there, yeah, she was scared of that.
Going back to the incident with the oily hand on the upper story window, did they have like footprints and things like that around there as well?
Do I looked? He did have a flower bed there, but I didn't see any footprints. It was like right along the retaining wall. I figured maybe it'd come out of the woods behind his house, and I was hoping it stepped in the flower bed before it stepped on the retaining wall. I didn't see any footprints anywhere around. That handprint was pretty distinct on its own. I looked around for hair samples, um, basically just sniffing around for any stink from these things. Didn't really notice any of that. And right after I basically went out there and started hanging out, trying to see these things, then it didn't come around again. So I think maybe they saw me looking and watching, and they, kind of didn't come around. So it was kind of unique. So, but then again, some other people out there have said that they've seen them up on the mountain and various places in the game lands out there. So I don't know. It might have just relocated out of his area.
Do you have any other research stories that you could share with us?
And that's about it for the local area here. There's supposed to be some sightings recently down by the Clean Dam, um, which I had to get out there and talk to some people. But yeah, I'll be probably doing that in probably a week or so. But see if I can find them. But yeah, that's really about it.
Well, it's a lot. It's all of your life. You've been around these things a great deal,
Yeah,
through other people as well as your own sightings and your own research. So that's quite a bit of information. So, anything
yeah,
else you want to share with us?
that's about it. I mean, basically, I'm like I said, I'm leery about these dogmen things. They're well, if this to be believed, then these things are coming down out of like Michigan, and from what I'm gathering now, people are seeing these things all across PA, and that's a bit unnerving. That means these things are migrating, and given the fact that they don't seem like they're too friendly, that and Bigfoot, from what I hear, don't get along with them. They basically, you know, if a Bigfoot family's in an area and these things come to that area, the Bigfoot leave. So that's kind of interesting, as as far as two big hairy things like that, and they don't like each other.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I've heard of quite a bit of clash, and Dogman seems to have more of an aggressive sort of nature to it, where
Yeah.
Bigfoot is like, I don't hear very many really dangerous stories around Bigfoot. Intimidating, yes, but not necessarily a dangerous situation.
Well, I mean, I heard lots of things about people having rocks thrown at them and sticks and acorns and various things, but so far nobody's really gotten hurt that I'm aware of from a Bigfoot. Um, I mean, it's possible somebody maybe has and hadn't reported it, but doesn't seem to be like they're really aggressive toward us. But I mean, I've heard reports of dogmen literally chasing people in a car and things like that, and those things definitely are not something I'd want to tangle with.
What do you
So,
think is going to happen when a Bigfoot is actually discovered, found, the body is present, and it's acknowledged? What do you think is going to happen at that point?
from what I understand, that's actually happened already. They've actually people have shot them and recovered the body, and as soon as they get a hold of the press to say that they've got a body, to bring people in to actually, you know, validate that they do have it and all that. All of a sudden, a government agency shows up and they take the body and basically threaten the people. And uh, next you know, they're getting IRS audited every year for like next 20 years. All kinds of really nasty things happen to them, like getting pulled over every time they leave the house for random things with their cars. Basically, yeah, it doesn't seem like you know actually getting the body or solid proof of one of these is something that somebody somewhere does not want to happen, because there seems to be a lot of really negative things happening for anybody that even has any kind of solid evidence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've heard of that before too. And of course, you never know what is rumor and what is real. So,
Yeah.
not sure. But why do you think that the government would not want one to be discovered?
Well, a couple of reasons actually. One thing is the timber uh, companies. You got to figure timber is a multi-billion-dollar business, and if they actually had to own up to the fact that there's Bigfoot out there, then that's going to shut down the lumber companies. Because if they'll move a roadway, it's a multi-billion-dollar roadway for a turtle, then just imagine what they're going to do for a bipedal, ape or whatever these things are, that's in an area. Especially when there is a potential hazard, because, you know, we at least do forestry and cutting down these trees, that's going to put them in closer to us in our houses. So, yeah, I really don't think they want everybody to know that they're real, um, because there's just too much involved there. Plus, you have folks who would want to, do the revenue of going out hunting and fishing. So I think basically it's just money based, that they don't want people knowing about them. That way they discredit anybody they can. That I mean, there's a couple of people that they try to discredit, like every time they get a chance. But yet, it's a thing that some of their evidence is a little too solid for them to be totally discredited. I mean, like the fact they have DNA evidence that comes back to an unknown and undocumented uh, species. So I don't know. It's just interesting.
What do you think would happen if they find out they're a type of human, or they're highly related to humans, or are maybe an indigenous type of people? I've heard some people talk about what would that entail? What kind of rights would they have? And are they going to be
Yeah.
considered human beings? What do you think
Well, I
about that?
mean, if you look at what the government did to the Native Americans, then basically it would do the same thing to them. They would try to put them off under like little areas that they listed as wasteland, and do whatever they can to eliminate them. Um, basically that's what the government's history is. They've done that before. And, they tend to do the same thing over and over again. Um, like the scariest words, and there is we're from the government. We're here to help. You know, that's a scary, whole scary thing there. But yeah, it's just given the fact that the government's got an interest in them. I think the government would try to weaponize them if they got their hands on them. Um, and if they're actually found to be an actual people, like a lot of folks believe, then yeah, that would open a whole big can of worms there. Because then it would definitely have rights, and they're here long before anybody else. So yeah, I don't think the government would really like that too much.
I think it would be a complicated situation, that's for sure. And you've had a lot of division on people's opinions and ideas probably about what rights they do have and or not.
Yeah,
I can see that it could be a real complex situation, like you said.
yeah. 'Cause I mean, there's a whole thing there that's yeah. Even the indigenous people, they recognize them as just another tribe. Um, they don't really look at them as monsters or anything like most people do. They look at them as just strictly being another tribe of beings. Um, basically, like I said, they traded with them. They did all kinds of stuff, and they didn't really bother with them too much. They would encounter one. They weren't really fearful of them. And so you figure they were here, living in the wilds back when this country was still wild, and they would encounter these things a lot more often than we do. So the fact that they didn't really fear them, you know, that's they follow their example.
Exactly. Well, the Native Americans have a lot of stories about Bigfoot. Of course, they didn't call them Bigfoot, but they certainly have a lot of stories about their interaction with them, and
Hmm.
the mountain people, the protectors of the woods, and they often even refer to them as the beings that kind of lived between two worlds. What do you think they meant by that?
There's a lot of speculation, which I've never been able to prove it or whatever. But a lot of people are speculating that these things are multidimensional. That's why they disappear so easily. That you could be looking right at one and it would disappear on you, and basically they can go from one dimension right to another dimension or whatever. But that's kind of a little sci-fi kind of thing for me. I think these being a living being, um, they don't really seem to have technology, and I'm thinking that something like be able to change dimensions would require some kind of a device or something, um, which they really don't seem to have. Um, I know that they have been seen up in trees, and I think their ability to stay perfectly still actually loses or causes people to lose visual on them, especially at a distance, because they'll sit there and they'll be moving, which our vision tracks motion really good. We see something moving, we're drawn to the motion, and we can track it. If something actually goes totally still after we're tracking emotion on it, then we quickly lose, the vision on it. And I think these beings, that's what they do. They go totally still, and whenever they're being observed, and people lose track of them, and then whenever they get a sense that we are not looking at them, then they kind of, drop down or onto all fours and skedaddle away. But I think people have said about these Sierra sounds and all that, and the samurai chatter, and a lot of people are hearing that. So, and this might, thing of you get enough people that are saying the same thing, then there's got to be some truth in there somewhere. So the fact these things actually have a language leads me to believe they're not a monkey, because the monkeys, I mean, they do their squalls and their calls and things like that, but they're not doing actual vocalization. They're just doing, like the monkey noises. These things are like doing infrasound, and they've been known to actually call to people in English. They say like a person's name or something. Um, and they're really good at mimicking, from what I'm gathering, because they can actually copy somebody's voice. And there's been a couple of times growing up even that I hear my father call because his thing was step out on the porch, yell for us kids, and we'd come running back to the house, from where we were. And there was a couple of times I heard my dad yell as a child, and me and my brother, we'd run back to the house, say, "What do you want, Dad?" And he's got in call for you. And I look at my brother and I'm like, did Dad just called us, right? And he's like, "Yeah, Dad just called us." And there's our dad saying he didn't call us. So I don't know. It just, like I said, we really didn't think anything about Bigfooting around, being in the area. But given that, plus these structures, plus all that, and I was growing up, yeah, I'm sure they were there constantly the whole time I was growing up, and they're probably watching us kids. But I don't know. Just thinking of the run-ins I could have had with one of them that I didn't.
You were lucky. You were lucky
Yeah,
that you didn't have any kind of a frightening childhood experience with them. Like, and some children have had those experiences, and it kind of does change a person once you see something like that.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and end our interview today. I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing all these great stories and your thoughts and ideas about Bigfoot today. So I will let you know when this comes out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.